Hi, Wayne Dorban here. I'll go ahead and start and say we're having huge technical glitches today, so please be patient with us. There's going to probably be lots of little chat that goes on that is with the production side of things here in the room, and so just be patient with that as we move ahead. We've got a group of folks here with us live in Loveland, and there's a bunch of you out there on the internet, and this is going to be fun. We're going to have a good time today. One of the challenges we're having is actually with our speakers, so I'm going to be very open in disclosure on the front end. Dustin Dorban, who is on the phone with one of our technical folks right now, is for whatever reason not able to log on properly. So there's a lesson learned here. We'll just throw it out right here at the front. We needed to do our jobs a little bit better on the front end to get ready for this, and we didn't do that. So we just didn't get all the technical preparation done. So Dustin's not on right now. We're hopefully going to get him on before we get too far along in this, but otherwise we're going to talk about the different kinds of things that he was going to talk about, and we're going to have some fun. So again, thanks for joining us, and I know we've got some folks on. I can see some people in Bangladesh, and I see we've got Jason Aubrey on there from down in Denver, and it's glad to have you here with us today. We've got some people sitting in the room, some of our interns and staff here in Colorado. So today's topic was going to be an interview with Dustin Dorban. So you probably noticed that name is somewhat similar. Dustin is my son, and Dustin has been a partner with us here at the SEED, Nourish the Planet operations since we started back in 2006 in northern Colorado, and he is really the instrumental person behind a number of the indoor agriculture systems that we have here. And we were going to talk to him today, if we get him on here, about his life and different things about what brought him to where he's at today, and why he's doing what he's doing, and why he's excited about it. And then we're going to talk and show you different things about our systems. And I think Leigh-Ann's still going to be doing that for us here. And hopefully we won't just be showing pictures of me for very much longer here. So let's just get started with some thoughts today, and again on our topic. So interviewing Dustin. So Dustin is my son, as I said, born about 38 years ago, coming up in August of this year, in Moscow, Idaho, which is where I was a graduate student at the time and was at the University of Idaho, and he was born in the hospital in Moscow. Moscow's a college town in the heart of northern Idaho, and a beautiful place. Where actually, and maybe there's even a picture that Leigh-Ann's showing us here of that area, where at that point in my life as a young graduate student, if I could have, I would have never left that part of the country. And actually, it wasn't planned, but I'm leaving on a plane later today to fly to Spokane, Washington, which is the nearest major airport to the Moscow area, and then drive to Ponderay, Idaho, where I'm going to be meeting with some folks over the weekend, but very close to the area in which Dustin was born, and you're seeing some glimpses of in this picture that you see right now. A little different from the Rocky Mountains here in Colorado, although this picture, and Leigh-Ann, I don't know why, but on my screen at least it's sort of coming in and out of focus. Is there something you can do about that? The picture seems to be focused, and then it's not focused. Yeah, it's doing it again now. I don't know what it is that you're doing. So I guess when you have technical issues, you have them in droves. So again, picture of northern Idaho. What's different is this is a little bit unusual picture in that you're seeing above timberline here. A lot of the mountains in the northern Idaho area are not above timberline, so the trees will be growing all the way up to the summit, and very dense. Such dense undergrowth that in most places you can't really walk very easily without clearing away brush. The main reason for that is it's about 30 inches of rainfall a year, rain and snow combined. So a very different climate than here in Colorado, where we get 12 to 15 inches in the foothills, and even in the mountains. Even though they get more, it's all sort of in the winter, and therefore the understory is quite different. Anyway, Dustin was born there, moved to the South Dakota area not long after he was born, as I was now becoming a college professor in South Dakota. Here's a picture of Mount Rushmore. We're on the west side of the state. It's interesting, South Dakota, if you've not been there, is a very diverse state, to where the western portion of the state looks a lot like, well, it doesn't have statues like this all over, but has a very mountainous and hilly and wooded circumstance. And the eastern side of the state, east of the Missouri River, is farmlands, and that's where we lived. We lived on the east side of the state in the rural area around Sioux Falls, South Dakota. So he spent the early part of his youth there, and just a little bit of a story about him is that when he was 2.5, he asked his grandfather and we were together at the time, to take the training wheels off of his little bicycle that he had. And I said, Dustin, you can't even get up to the seat, so what good would it be to take the training wheels off? And so I wouldn't take them off. Well, sometime later that day, his granddad took the training wheels off, and the next day he was able to ride that bicycle, literally one that you'd normally see a 7 or 8-year-old on around. And the only way that he got on it is he would set it up next to a trailer hitch, and he'd stand up on the trailer hitch, and he'd jump onto the seat of the bike and then push the handlebars away at the same time. This is a 2.5-year-old, and ride forward on that bike. And so it was a little bit of an indication of things to come, because when he was about 4, we were driving past a park that we drove by as we would drive around on a daily basis, and I didn't even know that there was this track there, but there was a BMX track, a bicycle motocross track at this park. And here's a 4-year-old who is seeing it at a distance. I mean, it wasn't right next to the road. It was back in the park a little ways, and he was seeing it there. And you're seeing a picture of a BMX track here. This one is not the one that was in Sioux Falls, and it isn't quite as mountainous as this, but he would see this track that you're sort of like this, a distance away, and he said, you know, can I go over there? Can I race? And so at about 4 years old, we started him out BMX bicycle racing, and throughout his younger years, from 4 until about 12, probably would go to 30 different weekend races around wherever it was that we were living, and then about 5 or 6 times a year we'd drive all around the country to go to BMX bicycle races, and into literally all over the western United States. So when he was about 8, we moved to Boise, Idaho, and I think Leigh-Ann's got some pictures of Boise, and we lived on the outskirts of Boise. This is an interesting one showing a really cool view of the mountains in the background. So Boise's a lot like Denver in that it sits right at the base of the Rocky Mountains, except that instead of the mountains being to the west, the mountains are to the east. So this picture is looking, I think this is almost a straight eastern view of the mountains with snow on them, adjacent to Boise, downtown Boise. And that's where Dustin spent his sort of early adolescent years, and he transitioned from riding BMX bicycles to starting to ride mountain bikes, race mountain bikes, and also road bikes. And that was a thing that we would do on weekends. We would go to races all around the Pacific Northwest, and he would race. So here's actually a couple pictures that you saw of a mountain bike race, and then here's one of a road race. In 1990, we moved to the Denver area, and by that time, Dustin was heavily involved in bicycle racing, road bikes and mountain bikes. Here's a picture of Denver. So again, a little different direction, looking now west and through the trees, and probably at City Park towards downtown. We were on a mountain bike ride one day. If Leigh-Ann would put a cursor on the screen, sort of at the edge of that building that looks like a cash register. That's a large building in Denver, and some people actually call it the cash register building. If you go up to the mountains right behind it, sort of on the ridge there, the Colorado Trail runs right along that ridge. And we were on a ride on the Colorado Trail, and we just had come up to a crest and we met a couple of riders coming the other direction. And they both had jerseys on that represented a team that they might be riding for. And it turned out they were a husband and wife that were the leaders of a club, a bicycle racing club that was based in Denver called the International Christian Cycling Club. And we got their names and contact information, and as we finished our ride, and I don't remember whether it was the same day, but sometime in the near term after that, we reached out to them. Turned out they were based in the downtown Denver area, actually in the midst of these large buildings you're seeing here. And every, I think it was Monday night, they would have an indoor workout, and people would get together and pull their trainers out and other things, and they would do a workout. So soon after that, we came to the workout, and it turned out that Marilyn, so this husband and wife couple were Marilyn and Marlon, and Marilyn was the 8-time Canadian national cycling champion. She had been on the Canadian Olympic team, did not race in the Olympics because she got injured right before them, but was actually their top cyclist. And about literally less than 6 months before we met them on this trail, they had moved to Denver because they believed that Denver was a more central area to be basing this national club at, and actually international club, and they had moved there to be getting it going, and we were some of the early members of that club. So that initiated a relationship that continued for a long period of time, and was real exciting between us as our family and theirs. And Marilyn became Dustin's coach, and he started doing higher level bicycle races in Colorado and around the area. And soon thereafter, he was discovered in one of those races by a guy that is pretty well known if you know U.S. cycling at all. His name's Alexei Graywall. He was an Olympic silver medalist for the U.S. in the Olympics in cycling. He was a professional cyclist based out of Denver, was racing on a team called Coors Light at the time, and he was easily one of the top 5 professional bike riders in the United States. And he saw Dustin race and actually asked him if he could be his coach. And so for a number of years, Dustin became his student as well as Marilyn's. And because of Alexei's influence and knowledge, got introduced to coaches at the national level, and soon thereafter, Dustin was asked to be on the U.S. national cycling team. So for a period of years, from the time he was 14 or 15 until he was 18, we spent a lot of time around all of North America, actually, with races in Canada and Mexico and in the United States. And we had a 1990 van that we bought, and this was in the 1990 time frame and beyond. And in like 4 years, we put 200 and some thousand miles on this van, driving back and forth to bicycle races all over the United States. And so he had a chance to race with all the names that you'd recognize in the cycling world, including some that are famous, maybe somewhat infamous now, but Lance Armstrong and George Hincapie and a whole bunch of others that are considered amongst the most elite racers in the history of cycling in the United States. As I mentioned those names, though, right now you probably best know them for some of the things they didn't do so right, and particularly for their drug use. And when Dustin was 18 and was going to be transitioning into what's called the senior cycling level, the U.S. national coach at that time, whose name I won't mention at this point, you can do some research and figure that out, actually gave an edict to the entire U.S. team and said, if you don't use drugs, you can't be on my national team. And the second thing he said is, if you aren't, as long as you're on the national team, you can't go to college. And so there were a whole bunch of guys on the team at that time that actually quit, and including some of the very best riders in the United States, and Dustin was one of those. So he quit the cycling team because of the two things, the not wanting to use drugs, and second, not being able to go to college. And one of the things that Alexei, his coach, had told him, Alexei was like 36 years old at the time and didn't even have a high school education, and certainly not college. And Lexi said, doesn't matter what you do with cycling and racing, if you're the best in the world, you make sure you go get a college education. And your career is only going to last until you're in your 30s, and you'll have a whole life ahead of you. And if you don't have a college education, you're going to greatly regret it. And because I do now, or Alexi said, I regret it. And interestingly, Alexi actually ran for mayor here in Loveland, which is where we're based. By the way, you're maybe hearing something. We're getting a little rainstorm outside, and we're in a metal building. So those of you that are listening might be hearing the raindrops here in a second. Any rain that we get here is always amplified dramatically by the metal building, so it's not raining nearly as much as it sounds. So anyway, Dustin's cycling career as a racer ended at that point, and he transitioned over into a college circumstance. And Leigh-Ann, I don't know if you have any pictures of his adventures during the time when we owned the Outdoor Adventure Resort, which was soon after that in northern Colorado. Anyway, Dustin started going to college. Actually had a scholarship to race cross country, and did that for a year or maybe 2 years. Decided that running wasn't nearly as fun as cycling, and didn't do that as long. But got real serious about education. Ended up getting a construction management degree at Colorado State University in Fort Collins, and then transitioned from that on to moving ahead in his work life. And he actually went to work for a company that he interned with during college, which is one of the largest developers in the United States, called Prologis. And his role with them was the development and building of industrial complexes around the country. And he would oversee those and provide construction management services and skills. About 5 or 6 years into that process, I was at a point in my career where I was ready to do two things. One, move from the place we had lived for about 16 years in the southeast part of Denver and move to someplace in northern Colorado for a lot of different reasons, mainly one that had to do with the fact that our hobby was raising dogs and competing with them in what are called field competitions, and we wanted some land that had water on it. And so the best place we could find, and a lot of our friends lived in northern Colorado rather than in the southern Denver area. So we were planning to make a move. We had acquired a fix-up house together, Dustin and I had, and he was in the process of fixing that up and actually was living in it at the same time. He was just about finished with that project. And as we were making the transition to move to northern Colorado, my wife and I, Deb, Dustin started talking about potentially also making the move and us starting to do some real estate development in northern Colorado and do some green housing development. And he had shown an interest in that ever since his youth, to actually build houses. And he had Legos when he was a kid, and he had thousands of them and would build all kinds of structures, design them, and then build them, and said that he really would like to do that at some point in his life. So as we moved to northern Colorado, he transitioned into that mode. He had also, by that time, gotten married to Debbie, his wonderful wife, and I don't know if you have pictures of any of their family here, Leigh-Ann, but if you do, you could show that. I keep chuckling at this picture because it looks like Dustin sitting on the toilet or something here in one of the models that we have of one of our early microgreen systems that I'll talk about here in just a little bit. By the way, I'm going to be one tired speaker when this is done. It doesn't look like we're having any luck at getting Dustin connected here. So anyway, he made the transition up here. We started doing some development on the real estate side, and then the real estate collapse hit in 2008. And we persisted for a while after that, and then realized that we were just not going to be able to do the green real estate development that we had hoped. And so we started doing some other indoor agriculture projects. And one of the areas that we had some clients that were interested in was shrimp culture. And we were starting to develop a site in northern South Carolina. And here you're seeing a picture of a shrimp. Leigh-Ann, just because we're being technical here, for the next time, also try to work out in advance. Do something so that when you bring up slides that they don't get that blurred look for 5 seconds or so when they come on. So we're going to need to deal with that, just so that we are aware of it. So you've seen a picture of a shrimp here, and this is a Pacific marine white shrimp. This is the same shrimp that most people will get in their grocery stores all around the United States. So these are not grown in a native in the Pacific Ocean, mostly in tropical areas off the coast of Asia, and also off the coast of South America, which is where most of the natural stocks of these shrimp are located. And we had a client that was interested in doing a indoor culture, and so we started to work on a project with them. Dustin didn't have any experience working with this, but he ended up creating an interest in it, and he helped design what was going to be the largest indoor shrimp production facility in the world that was going to be located in South Carolina. And we started the construction process on that. And Leigh-Ann, why don't you show that picture that's got the picture? There we go. There's 3 shrimp that are probably all about what we would call 16 count size, which means 16 of those to a pound, so they're about an ounce each. And with 16 ounces to a pound, those are large shrimp. That would be what would be called jumbo shrimp normally. Anyway, we started out in the shrimp culture, and unfortunately, one of the partners that was funding died abruptly, and that put the project on hold for a little while. But that allowed us to actually do something very cool here in Colorado, in that we then came up with the idea of doing a smaller scale shrimp production project in greenhouses that we had here in northern Colorado. And Dustin constructed that system and operated it, and for just about 2.5 years we were producing shrimp in our greenhouses for the local market. So we had buyers that were all over the northern Colorado area that were acquiring those shrimp and using them for their high-end meals that they were feeding. And we grew them in sophisticated swimming pools with some very interesting heat transfer systems that Dustin had designed. Again, for those of you out of the area in northern Colorado in the winter, it'll get below 0. Maybe I think at one point our lowest that we had in that time frame was about 30 degrees below 0. The water that these shrimp lived in needed to be 80 degrees or more. And so year-round we would keep our water temperature above 80 degrees. Dustin designed a heat transfer system that was very unique, quite proprietary, and one that we continue to use now in other systems that we have. So fast forward a little bit until that project sort of came to an end for a real simple reason. We couldn't afford to heat those greenhouses any longer. They were older greenhouses that had been built back in the 80s. They had a very inefficient heat loss situation, and our heat costs through 4 months of the year were so excessive that they wiped out all the profit that we could make throughout the rest of the year. So about 1.5 years ago, we shut that operation down in the greenhouses and actually planned another project in Akron. And we're moving down the road in a warehouse to be building the next small-scale shrimp production project there, when some operating partners that we had targeted decided that they didn't want to be involved, and that project is still sitting on hold right now as we look for some operating partners there. At the same time, we had another group in Qatar that showed very strong interest in a shrimp production facility. So we spent about 6 months in Qatar designing and coming up with the plans for another very large scale, actually much larger even than the planned facility for South Carolina. And that one is also still on the drawing board. All the cost of the design have been paid for. and the group that's potentially interested in that is still out there. And we just have had a number of other projects that have come up, and we haven't moved that one ahead a whole lot further. So that brings us up to about 2.5 years ago, when we had a very large drought that was going on in northern Colorado. And I think you've heard in previous webinars that one of the things we do is we grow sustainable livestock, and particularly we grow alpacas. We have one of the larger herds of alpacas in the Rocky Mountain region. And we were seeing our hay prices double, and even at one point they tripled over what they had been previously. Again, I apologize. Please be patient with the fact that these slides are out of focus. If you wait just a little bit, they come into focus. The prices had gone up. This is a picture of me with one of our alpacas at our ranch, and this is in the spring when we have lots of grass and it's easy to feed them. But for about 6 months of the year, we have to feed hay, and the hay prices went from approximately $200 a ton up to over $400, and in some cases closer to $600 a ton. And we started looking at alternatives. And in that process, we came up with the idea of looking at what are called fodder, and we've since named it as microgreens. And so that really cool looking picture of, as I said, what looks like Dustin sitting on a toilet, was actually the first generation of a system that we built in our warehouse here, using boot trays that we bought at the Container Store, a 2x4 frame construction in which the trays were on, and you can see sort of both sides of it. It was designed so that as this was grown in size, it would fit inside a container, a shipping container. So what you're seeing in the picture is 8 feet wide with an aisle in the middle, 30 inches in terms of depth to the tray side on each side. So this is identical in width to the systems that we now have in containers that we'll see some slide pictures of here in just a little bit. There's a picture of our 2 production containers in the middle of the winter here, with the door open to one, and you can see a little bit of the trays on one side, and the other one the door is closed, going into that facility. So this was the first prototype. We started to grow wheatgrass and barley grass, which you're seeing some pictures of here. And again, the train's going by here, and we're right next to a train track in our location here in northern Colorado. You can see here this is 8 days of growth of either barley or wheat. I'm not sure. When you look at both of those as they're growing, it's really hard to tell the difference between them physically over those first 8 days. This particular mat probably has over 90% germination rate of the seeds. What you're seeing that look like seeds there are actually the shells from seeds that have had their roots grow out of them from one direction, and the greens growing out above, and preparing that mat for being able to be eaten by livestock. So we went from that first small system that you saw to a full-fledged container-based. Actually, Leigh-Ann, if you go back to that picture that we had previously, the one of the containers side by side, the unit on the right in the picture was the first one that we built, and we installed it out at our ranch. This picture is taken at our warehouse facility, which is where we're sitting right now and doing this webinar from. And the system on the right actually was just an expanded version of the one that you saw in the previous picture that Dustin was sitting in. And it has 8 rows of trays where one day's growth will stay on one row, and then the rows that are either above it or below it are different days of growth. We'll talk about this in more detail in another webinar at another time. And every day we harvest one row, we clean the trays from that row, and then we plant that same row. And there are 60 trays in total in the container. Each tray, which will be producing somewhere between 12 and 15 pounds a day when it's optimal production of food. So again, if this was a picture taken today, after the harvest is done, we call them flakes. So if you would go back to maybe that picture that you showed before, Leigh-Ann, of the tray that was there, there it is, that one. That is a portion of a tray of microgreens, and we would call those flakes, and each flake would then be about 15 pounds, and we would feed those flakes individually to our animals. So that one unit would produce somewhere between 900 and 1,200 pounds a day, and maybe even some cases a little higher of microgreens over an 8-day production cycle. So just to finish that story up, after that first generation system, which operated for about 1.5 years out at our ranch, early in the winter last year, we decided that it would be better to bring it in here to the warehouse. It looks like somebody else is coming online. Actually, it looks like Dustin.
Yep.
Dustin, you're there.
It appears that way.
So I'm not hearing him, Leigh-Ann. Are you? Okay, so I guess I don't know how easy it's going to be to ask questions when I can't hear at all. But Leigh-Ann, if you could help us figure this out, and you might want to push the camera back just a little ways, Dustin. There you go. There you're good. So I've been telling your story a little bit, and where we were in the story was actually up to microgreen production. Haven't talked at all about food in the box, which we can get to here in a second. But I'd actually like to back up. I don't know how we're going to do this. Leigh-Ann, I'm going to need to see your face, so you're going to have to move that light. And, because I can't hear him at all. So you're going to have to tell me as he answers, and I'll try to read lips a little bit. But and let me just see. I don't think I have my my headset muted, so I'm not sure why I'm not hearing him. I don't. For whatever reason, I am not hearing him. So hit save. So Dustin, we got through the technical. How'd you finally get in? What'd you figure out?
I had to log in to my Wi-Fi hotspot on my phone, so I'm guessing it's something to do with the network here that wasn't allowing me to.
So it was a local issue there. Sounds like.
That way, yeah.
Okay. So let's backtrack a little, and we had a whole bunch of questions we were going to ask. So let's go back in and talk about some of that a little bit more. I talked a little bit from my perspective about your childhood and such, but tell us a little bit now about your current situation, actually where you're at, because I know you're in Texas. Maybe tell the group a little bit about that and what you're up to, and kind of your family situation and so on. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, as you said, I'm down here in Texas. I'm actually kind of hanging out with my in-laws. Did a little bit of work for them and helping out some other people around here as well. Did a transition phase in our life right now, I guess you'd say. Yeah. The work I'm doing down here is frankly, it's probably not related to what most of this will be talked about. It's just general construction sort of activities, which is where my background professionally.
So again, because I'm not hearing you, I'm going to guess here a little bit. But did you say anything about your family situation? Talk about your incredible family that you've got.
I didn't say much about the family yet. I do have. I've got an amazing wife and two wonderful little boys. A 5-year-old now. He just turned 5 a couple days ago, and a 7-year-old. And yeah, we're down here in Texas with my in-laws, who are also pretty amazing to us as well. So I've been blessed with great family all the way around.
Let's do this for a second, because I think the people in the room would love to be able to hear you too. Can anybody think about what I could maybe be doing different? We've done, this is a bunch of these we've done, and for some reason, I'm not getting any sound here at all through my computer. I don't know why I would need them, but if you've got an extra set, or can go grab my own. I'm going to put a set of headphones in here and see if I hear this. Just see if, but that's not going to help the room. Dustin, say something. See if I hear you.
Anything?
No. Let me try the other one. How about now?
Yes. No. Maybe.
No, I'm not getting it.
Is there anybody else hearing me?
Yeah, I don't know what's going on here. Everything that could possibly go wrong technically has gone wrong, because I've never seen this happen before. I've tried plugging this headset into both of my speaker jacks, and I'm not getting anything. I can figure it out. We'll be fine, but it's the people in the room that really aren't hearing anything. Can you hear? The people in the room are nodding to me, saying that they can hear. Why don't anybody that's listening to this on the computer? I'm hearing an echo now. Let's see if you guys are hearing an echo or not. We actually have our best member of the group, and that's Rocky, that's in here in the room with me. And Rocky just said to somebody in the room that she was enjoying this. By the way, Rocky is a gorgeous. Is it English bulldog or American? What is it?
Pink-nosed pit.
Oh, pink-nosed pit. I've heard of pit bulls, but I don't know that I've heard pink-nosed pit. Well, let me continue on with questions, and again, since this is being recorded, we can hear it anyway. So I know the answer to this that others don't, and I gave some of this to the group, but when you were growing up, what was one event from your youth that you remember that caused you to pursue the current life path that you're on? So just something that you might have remembered from when you were a kid.
I would say to say one event caused me to pursue the current life path. I don't think you could boil it down to a single event in any way, shape, or form. I think there's a combination of things, and frankly, there's a number of things that have happened since my youth that have gotten me to where I'm at. But I think one pretty significant I had was actually middle school. My mom decided to build her own house, and so I spent the summer with her building her house. Now, by any standard, it's a teeny little house. I think it was, 30 feet wide by about, or 30 feet long by about 20 feet wide. But we did everything from the foundation up in that, and so that definitely was a critical event in getting me focused on construction as a career path. Then what led into the work that we're doing, or I'm doing, with the sustainable agriculture. I can't hear him now either.
He's saying for me to unmute. So yeah, I had muted so I could talk to the rest of the room here. So here's one that I'm going to guess the answer to, but so I'll keep it to myself. But when you were 15 years old and it was a beautiful Saturday afternoon, what would we find you doing? So it was just a gorgeous Saturday afternoon. You're 15 and you can be doing whatever you want. What would you be doing?
Well, I guess we can all define what a beautiful Saturday afternoon looks like. But typically, I think you'd assume that's a summer, a spring, or a fall. Although I've had some beautiful Saturday afternoons in the mountains as well. But at any point during the warmer months of the year, I would have been in a bike race somewhere around the country. And if we were talking a point in the year where it was one of our cooler months, when the bike racing season wasn't in effect, I would have been on a long training run.
All right. Again, I'm seeing that you've stopped from the lips stopping moving. So here's one. Tell us one person who influenced you in your youth to have any major experiences that you would have experienced after college. In other words, they influenced you, and then that influence caused you to have something major that happened after you graduated from college.
And frankly, this actually didn't a major activity after it occurred in college, and the one that one of many people who influenced me in my youth, but I think had a significant effect on me being who I am, and that's my grandfather, dad, who is one of those guys who could fix anything. It built everything was with his hands, was mechanical and such. And one of his passions, boats and water skiing, and specifically old wooden boats, so classic craft boats and such. When I was in middle school, he bought what was his dream boat, a 1951 19-foot Chris Craft racing runabout. And I had the opportunity to help pretty significantly in the restoration of that boat for about a year and a half that it took him to do. And I decided then and there that I was going to get a boat of mine as soon as I could. I tried for years to convince my dad to buy a boat for us because I loved being on the lake and I loved water skiing, and that was so finally, while I was in college, I made it a mission to go and buy my own boat, and I did. Found an old wooden boat that was really, they call it a plans boat as much as anything. It was out in Washington. I drove out there, picked it up, and I spent the better part of the next 3 to 4 years restoring. And so, but the broader picture is sort of influences that just help me to realize, you can, if you desire to and such, you can create pretty much whatever you want.
Hear that, but I didn't hear all of that, but I did hear that you said something about the fact that for 4 years you were trying to convince me that you should have a boat. I don't remember that. What age group, what age frame was that?
Middle school through high school. We'd go to boat shows and...
So we didn't have a boat then at all?
No. Idaho or...
Am I muted? Do you remember the boat that we had when you were really little?
I don't, no.
We didn't take that to Boise, did we?
No, you definitely didn't take it to Boise. I'm trying to remember it being in South Dakota ever even.
So I never even took you out on Russ's jet boat. I mean, did you know that he had that?
I heard about Russ's jet boat. Never got to make a trip on it. No.
On the Snake on a jet, other than you went with dories down the Snake, down the Snake, right?
Down the Snake. No, I never got to go on the Snake in a jet boat at all. I made that one trip in the dories, like you said. We get to see plenty of jet boats going up and down, but I never did that myself. It looked like a lot of fun.
Tell them about your uncle's sort of rafting career, and you've done that several times with him, right? In several different locations.
Actually, the only trip that I've ever done with my uncle was that trip we did on the Snake. Yeah, my uncle, right out of college, went and was a guide. You probably know this better than I will as far as how long, but I want to say 10, maybe even as much as 15 years, was a guide for the Grand Canyon dories. So running dories down the Grand Canyon primarily. Did some other some other rivers around, but that was
my computer. So I'm hearing you now. Actually, there was a setting on my computer that I don't know. It was different than what I've had it before, but they're actually now finally able to hear you in the room too. So, actually, did you do the salmon ever with him?
No, only trip that I have done with him was that one that we did on the Snake.
Oh, you never.
While we were living there in Boise.
So you didn't do the Grand Canyon ever?
No, I've never done that. We talk about trying to do that. I mean, as I understand it, because he's still got his own. I think they got a raft in Story anymore, and they do the Grand Canyon once every 5 years or so. But I think that getting a permit for that is, those are like gold anymore.
Right. Yeah. Well, I'm glad I can hear you now. By the way, glad you made it on here. So I think I heard it. So it was the issues were that it wasn't letting you on because of the local network was just.
Must be it, yeah, because it just security error. So I tried both of my computers with no luck, and so I use I'm using the hotspot on my phone as my network connection now, and that's what allowed me to get. Must have been a firework. Router here.
You cut out just a little bit. Are you hearing that, Leigh-Ann? So
I don't know.
It's probably just because of the microphone on the computer, but it actually kind of happens, I think, when you move your head around. So
okay.
So tell us about what the term sustainability means to you. Sustainability, regeneration, anything of that nature. What does that word mean? Yeah.
To me, I think sustainability would just be the act of being a good steward. The resources that we've been entrusted with. I am one who is a firm believer in an intelligent creator, and so I, strongly believe that everything that is here on this earth has been entrusted to us for a temporary period of time, and that it's our responsibility to be a good steward of that, and to frankly get the best value out of the resources that we have available to us, and to make sure that those resources remain available for the future as well. So
very cool. Is there a person in the green movement or sustainability area or even environmental area that's had a profound impact on your life? And if so, who is that? And then tell us a little bit about them and why they're important to you.
I'm not somebody who's traditionally impressed with kind of the cult of personality, so I'm not somebody who gets really individuals. Frankly, the people that impress me the most are the ones that know about, the ones who kind of go about doing good things. There's a very obvious answer here, and as far as who in the environmental or the sustainable or the green industry that's had the most significant impact on my life, and that would be you as my dad. I think that it would be hard to argue that there's really anybody else in my life who's had a stronger impact and such, just on who I am and the way that I am and such. So.
Well, thank you for that, and I appreciate that. Because obviously that's a goal that I have, and it isn't for you, it's for hopefully anybody that I'm around, so I appreciate that. I know you've had lots of interesting life experiences. Give us some stories about them, anyone you can think of, and I think Leigh-Ann's maybe got some visuals that she'll throw up, because I think you two have talked about it a little bit. And then as you talk about them, maybe I'll expand on them a little.
Yeah, for me, probably the early in my life, the most, I think, kind of formative life experience that I had was my time as a competitive cyclist, and it wasn't something that ended up becoming a career in any way or form. I've got I know a handful of guys that I competed against and with that did go on and make a professional career out of it. So that, and frankly, at the time, that's that was my mindset as well. It was almost a means to an end for me, and I had the opportunity late in my career to be coached by actually a name who's known there locally now for a different reason, but a gentleman by the name of Alexei Graywall. He was the '84 Olympic gold in the Los Angeles Olympics for cycling, and then had gone on to make a pretty significant career for himself. And now he's a number of times there in Loveland and such. But I remember him telling me early on, and this was definitely a shift for the way that I was looking at it and thinking of it at the time, that cycling is not a means to an end, and that sports in general. This was a guy who had just made a 10+ year professional career out of riding and racing his bike. And he said, it really should be much more about the character development and such that you gain from that. And I frankly, at the time, I didn't necessarily agree with it because I was still very much that this was going to be my career, at least for a short period of time in my life, and it cannot be that way. But I do still think that really the much of my work ethic, for sure, and a dedication to projects and such, come from those experiences that I and that kind of molding early on in my life. There's one, and I'm trying to remember. You may be able to help me out with this a little bit, Dad. What race it was, and I don't remember if you were there or not. It was a local race, a crit, over by over in Lakewood. Anyway, this particular course was a square. You went up a block, over a block, down a block, and a block. So just a 4-block square, I believe, and there was a decent grade variation in this. So coming down into the last straight, down probably about a 6% grade, not for very long. Like I said, it was only a block long in that section, into a 90-degree corner. That corner had a median in the middle of it. And so I was watching the pro race. Actually, called it the 1-2 stood for Category 1 and Category 2, which are the sort of the elite level class or elite classifications for amateur cyclists. And Colorado has a number of those as well. There was a couple of guys who were coming up to within the last quarter of the race for sure. There was a 3-man breakaway, which means that these 3 guys had quit from the larger group in this race. They were out front, so this would have been, at this point in the race, first, second, and third place. And they were coming down this hill. The lead guy clipped his pedal on the curb as he was going through that corner and doing probably about 5 miles an hour, slid across the pavement, hit the curb, bounced over the median, and now I'm trying to remember. I can see you talking a little bit there, Dad. I'm trying. You can maybe help me out here.
I don't remember it.
I don't even know if you're there. Is Eric Nevin ring a bell? I was trying to remember.
Yeah, Eric Nevin's a pro. It could have been Eric Nevin. Yeah.
It would have been an amateur at the time. I don't think he was pro.
Okay. Yeah, he was a pro 1-2 guy.
So bounced over this 8-foot wide median and landed in the what would have been the traffic. Fortunately, there was no traffic there. Both his wheels, which effectively means that both wheels were in the shape of a taco shell, the curb. Gets up, his skin suit, which is the outfit he was wearing, was shredded from his shoulder down to his thighs, and road rash under there as well. The first thing he does is he pops, this has happened just, within seconds, is looked around and where is my bike? I can't find my bike. Where's my bike? Grabs the bike and goes running back to the start-finish line, where if you do have an incident in a race, in a criterium, you're allowed to get one free lap. So he had a lap, or the time that it would take to do a lap, to get new wheels and get back into this race. And it impressed me. I mean, dripping blood, had just gone through something that most people would just be sitting in shock of, and his frame of mind, and the only thing that he was focused on was getting his bike back into that race. And I don't know why it struck me so much at that point in time, because we had seen accidents like that before. My dad has had a couple of those. I had a couple myself. That kind of level of dedication, and this was a guy who, again, at the time, he wasn't making a living at it. More than likely, he was living out of the back of his car, working at some local bike shop, just enough to be able to train and keep food in his mouth, pursuing his dream there and such. And so that was a pretty impactful thing for me. And I was probably 16, 17 at that point in time.
I didn't get up like that from the wrecks that I had.
I'm trying to remember. You remember the course? We went and looked at an office building over there, Denver West.
Yeah, I remember the Denver West course. And actually, as you were saying it, I thought that was Denver West you were talking about. I don't remember that accident. So either I wasn't there.
I don't think Jeff and I were just standing down at that corner watching the race. It wasn't where most of the spectators were at.
Okay. Yeah, maybe I was there and just didn't see it. Anyway.
Jeff and the judge and such are really the only ones who probably saw it.
Tal, because you remember it better than I do, at a similar criterium race of national prominence in Boise, Idaho, when you were racing with the pros, and what, 2 laps to go? Or maybe it was even in the last lap.
I'm pretty sure.
The final lap, wasn't it?
Yeah.
You did not get a free lap, and you were right at the front. And you tell the group what happened there.
A similar sort of a scenario. I guess a little bit of background in the realm of cycling. There are, a couple distinct categories of riders. There are sprinters, and that's just what it sounds like. These are the guys who their whole goal in the race is to be there at the, because their primary strength is that last 200 meters. The rest of the race is just about making it to be there at that last 200 meters. And then there's climbers, and that is, again, what it sounds like to, they're at their best when the road goes uphill. And I was a climber. I'm 6 foot tall on the money. I was that same height back then, and I weighed 120 pounds soaking wet. My thighs were about twice the size of what a normal guy's thighs are, and the rest of me was skin and bones. And so I could not sprint to save my life. And so in a race like this, which is a short, criteriums are usually only about an hour and a half, 2 hours long, which relative to the other races is really a short race. And for the most part, they're normally flat. This one was that. So for me to have any chance in a criterium, I had to be at the front of the pack coming into that last 200 meters, because I knew that I was going to drop back usually 10 or so spots in that last 200 meters. And so that was it. I was up near the front, doing all that I could to come around the corner as close to the front as possible. In this particular race, what was it, 200 participants? It was a big pack.
Yeah.
I was, I think, probably number 3. This was the third to last corner, and it was another course that was it was a rectangle. So 4 corners, 4 straights, and you went around in a circle for an hour and a half. And so this was the third to last corner, or the third to last corner on the last lap, and I did what they always tell you not to do, but the reality is there's no way, if you're going to be competitive, to not do it. And I was pedaling through that corner. The guy to the inside of me moved out just slightly, and so I moved out. As we came back in, corrected, tightened our turn up, my pedal hit the ground, and that was all it took. Both tires flew up in the air about a foot off the ground, and the first thing that landed was my thigh, and slid across the pavement there at probably about 40 miles an hour, and stopped at the curb.
And the next day, you raced in another race with a new tire, new wheels.
Same scenario. Destroyed the wheel on the bike.
Destroyed the wheel, but raced in a championship race the next day, the state championship race for Idaho, on a different course, but in the downtown area. I think Leigh-Ann was showing pictures of downtown Boise there. So we're coming up against it here pretty soon. I tons of other questions, but I want to ask you a couple more of these. Would you, Leigh-Ann, go to the pictures of the food in the box system? And I was just about to talk about that. Just tell the people a little bit about this food in the box, this containerized system, and they're looking at pictures here. So just tell them a little bit about that. What led to its development and what it's supposed to be doing. I haven't talked about it at all.
Yeah, well, we've been researching, and I say we, it nourished the planet primarily. In fact, I was not involved in the early stages of the research, but started researching aquaponics as a sustainable agriculture technique 7 years ago or so. And so 3 years ago, we're throwing around ideas on how to really export sustainable agriculture systems, principally aquaponics systems, to other regions in the world.
Uh-oh. You lost him too? Are you hearing him?
Am I gone?
You were for a minute, so
okay.
We'll keep the last 10 seconds.
Yeah, well, we were, I guess the original idea came from trying to figure out how to distribute sustainable agriculture systems to areas of the world that really need them, and more specifically aquaponics systems. I think at the time, the place that we were focused on, because there was an orphanage in the Ukraine, and we're trying to figure out how would we take the knowledge that we had learned over 5+ years or so at that point in time to develop a aquaponics system, frankly be able to provide fresh food for the orphans there in that orphanage. We were aware of sort of the glut of shipping containers that are really in any of the port cities, at least around the country. I'm guessing that would be the case around the world. And we're intrigued with the idea of being able to use those. And I think the original thought was, well, we just pack everything necessary for an aquaponics system into a container and put it on the ship and send it out. And then more started to think about, well, what if we actually use the shipping container itself as structure for a system like that? So it would be something that could be constructed remotely. Our original thought was to be constructed either at our location or, frankly, the parking lot of the church that would have sort of been sponsoring this event, and then be able to be shipped out and fairly easily set up once it got there. So that was sort of the genesis of the idea, and it went from there. How would we design a efficient aquaponics system to work within a shipping container and get, you know, some sort of decent levels of production out of it and such.
So this picture, I'm hurrying you a little bit. Look at this picture here, and tell us what we're seeing, and don't have to worry about kind of all the detail, but I'm assuming that that's inside the container, and tell the audience what they're looking at.
Yeah, that's inside of one of the containers, the call them food in a box containers. Those are the grow tubes. When it's actually operating, each of those holes would be filled with a net pot that would have plants growing in it. There's lighting just above it. There's probably a better picture showing it with the plants already planted. You can see the lights above. And those tubes have the water with the nutrients in it. It flows through every 15 minutes, or 15 minutes out of every hour. So every 45 minutes, it's on for 15 minutes.
Okay. And how many, in a 40-foot shipping container, how many of those individual pots that we're seeing there with plants in them, and some with younger plants, and some, you know, on both sides, how many of those individual pots that we call pots or holes are there?
In that unit, there's 2,660 of them.
Okay. And I was just looking at a system we're building in the warehouse today that looks a lot bigger space-wise, and I think I counted that if we did 4 rows, there'd be 5,480, which would be about twice the size of what you just described. Does that seem about right to you?
Seems about right. Yeah, I mean, that area, that's it's about 50 feet in total length that you have there in 4 rows, and each row has got one more tube as well, so that would make sense that, yeah, you'd be about twice as many.
And I'm asking Hayden, who's in the room here now, when you're harvesting lettuce, which you have been doing, Hayden, and let's talk about it in serving size, would one pot as you harvest be about a serving, a single person serving for, let's say, a salad?
Optimal growth, probably. Ours are kind of
Okay, so 2 of those would be about a serving of romaine lettuce that we have. And I think that the timing-wise, after you're planting them in there as starts, they're anywhere between 4 and 6 weeks to where the harvest time frame is. Is that correct? So optimally, it'd be about once a month, right? At 4 weeks would be the optimum situation. So you could think about it to where it could be potentially a serving a month in the optimal growth per hole. And that's just so to give you, so that would mean this particular unit with 2,600 holes could produce something around that kind of a volume. And the goal would be to have that production spread out to where every week you had something to harvest. And that's what we're doing with the system that those pictures were taken of, right, Hayden?
Yeah.
So we're going to run out of time here, so I want to get back to a couple more of the more personal questions, and we'll end with this, because I know that you've actually thought about these some. Can you tell us about one memorable negative experience that you've had in your life that has molded you and helped you to become a better person?
Sure. This was an experience when I was in college. I say we, frankly, it was you, my dad, had purchased a piece of property up in Buena Vista to develop it as an adventure sports resort. Now, this particular piece of property was used as a campground. One portion of the camp what you consider to have full hookups. So it had electrical, water, and sewer hookups for RVs and stuff that will be parked in there. The sewer system consisted of about you can maybe correct me on the length here. I'm guessing it was about 1,500 feet, maybe 2,000 feet from one end to the other.
Probably 1,500.
Running north to south, single pipe that then emptied into a septic tank and then into a leach field at the south end of the property. This was an old clay pipe that from day one gave us all sorts of fits, getting clogged up, and it didn't help some of our guests put some of the most ridiculous things down this particular pipe. And so during this, one of our first summers up there, that pipe, clearing that pipe was sort of a daily activity. I remember one day, it was a beautiful summer day. I was, at the time, the crew foreman there, or responsible for running the construction crew at the time that was turning this into, converting this from just a campground into the adventure sports resort that we were making it into. We had about 10 guys, I think, at the time that were working under my supervision. And one of them came to me while I was off doing something and said, hey, the line is clogged again. So walked over there, and there were about 3 guys already standing there. Picture your typical highway work crew, 3 guys holding up shovels or making sure, leaning up against a shovel, staring at this hole in the ground that was full of the nastiest liquid that you could imagine. And so I came over, and, we're all kind of standing there looking at it, and I'm thinking to myself, that somebody's going to have to get down in there, and it ain't going to be me because I'm the foreman. And I remember at about that time, you drove up. At the time, was that Cherokee or was that IRG?
Cherokee.
Okay. So senior partner at Cherokee Real Estate, which, a huge real estate company at the time. You rolled up in your Lexus with Deb and my 3 sisters. I'm pretty sure you had spent the morning playing golf because I'm pretty sure you were wearing a golf shirt and a pair of shorts. May have even still had the golf shoes on. And really, without missing a beat, walked over to this hole, asked what was the issue here. They said, we got something clogged, 4 feet down into that nasty mire that we need to get removed. You took off your shirt, reached your hand down in there, and pulled out, I believe it was a towel. And that was a pretty impactful experience for me as well, to see, of anybody standing there, you were the one who should have, the one who would have been the least expected to do that. And, stepping up and taking that role to get that resolved when there was, a bunch of other guys who you were paying just standing there looking at it, was a pretty impactful experience. And I spent the majority of the rest of that summer dealing and down in that muck in various places, dealing with that sewer line.
As you were talking there, and I remember that circumstance, and that wasn't an isolated one. I was actually looking online to see if there were any pictures that I could show of Gold Camp, and that's been late 1990s, maybe 2000, and I'm sure we had digital pictures then, but we're not coming up with any. But he's right; it was 1,500 feet, and it was an old clay pipe, and anyway. So, and you'd told that story before, so I remembered it. I can't tell you that I exactly remember doing that. I remember doing it in several different instances there. So you remember somebody was with me from the office?
No, it was just you guys.
Oh, okay.
I was just, it was a dichotomy of here were
Yeah.
us, a bunch of dirt kickers
Right.
standing there who should have been responsible for that, and you're the owner, you were the boss, and really had just come up to spend an enjoyable weekend up there,
Right.
if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And yeah.
So 2 more questions. What's a book that you read recently that's influencing you at all today?
I will be the first to admit I'm not a big reader by any means. Frankly, I don't read very well. It was a struggle for me when I was young, and even now I do it just well enough to get by. And I do well to keep up with my daily reading of my Bible and some other Bible studies and such. For the most part, occasionally I'll have the time to dig into other books, but really get down to it. The book that I read that's got the most significant impact on my life and have been for years now is the Bible. So.
Very neat. I think that Leigh-Ann had a picture even there. So, 2 more. Can you think of a quote or a phrase from anyone famous, and you make the definition of famous, that you can remember that you think our audience should hear because it's memorable to you?
Yeah, and again, this kind of goes back to my nature and who I am, my leadership style, and I think a lot of the stories that you maybe heard from me today would lead toward this. But I'm a firm believer in sort of a servant leadership sort of a model, and frankly, my Lord and Savior is, I think, the best example of that. And so the quote here is actually not from directly from Jesus, but it's Paul who wrote this, but it's in reference to him, and it's Philippians 2:3-8. I remember reading this for the first time. Again, I was back in, I think, maybe a sophomore in high school, and it's stuck with me since. It says, "Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourself. Not looking to your own interest, but each of you to the interest of others." And then it goes on, "In your relationship with one another, have the same mindset as Jesus Christ, who, being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking on the very nature of a servant, being in a human likeness, and being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself to become obedient to death, even death on the cross." And so, again, it goes back to the story I just told about you, and hopefully, I don't think I do a great job of it, but at least the way that I'd like to lead is to really put myself as the least among those that I'm working with or working around.
Well, I actually think you do a great job of it. So that's an incredible text and one that I think you live more than you actually would even realize. So last question. We're going to end on this one. This is one that I stole from a guy named John Lee Dumas, who does an amazingly popular podcast on a daily basis where he interviews entrepreneurs from all over the world. So if you ever get a chance to listen to that, it's called Entrepreneur on Fire, and John Lee Dumas is doing one every day. Actually, he does them in bunches of about 10 at a time, but he puts a new one out every day. So he says the question is a doozy. And here's it is. If you were to wake up tomorrow and found that you were on another planet, but you had all the same resources around you, and it looked like you were on Earth, and you had 2 other things. You had a laptop, all your daily needs appeared to be taken care of, You had a laptop and $500. What would you do for the next 7 days?
Yeah, and I guess I'm assuming here, and you know what they say when you assume, so I probably shouldn't have, but I'll go with it, that, kind of the premise is that you're in an environment that's the same as what you're used to, but don't necessarily either have the individuals around you that you would normally have, and frankly don't have any responsibilities while you're there as well.
That's correct. Yep, you can make those assumptions. Those are accurate.
And so, my original thought when I saw this question was, well, shoot, if I didn't have any responsibilities, I didn't have, the people that I'd really like to be sharing these experiences with around me, I was trying to think of, well, what would I really like to do? Maybe go see something that I've never been able to see before and stuff, but I think if it really came down to it, you say I've got a laptop, so I'm assuming I've got the ability to get some internet access and stuff. And that would be to do something that I've wanted to do in different occasions, but because of, like you said, other responsibilities at the time, I'd probably try to find some way that I could go and be of assistance, whether it's, some sort of local disaster. I was watching, just last night on the Weather Channel, they had a program on the Joplin tornado. And so some way that, I could go and use the talents that I have to help in some way, shape, or form where I may be.
Cool. So you'd figure out and see if the internet would tell you where there might be a disaster somewhere.
Yeah, where can I get to with a $500 plane ticket, and maybe make a radius there, and what's in the day's news there, whether it was a disaster or somebody, a group in need of help or service or such there. So.
Well, very good. We went over a little bit, but I think it was great because we obviously didn't get to see all of you at the front end, and maybe when we edit this, we'll take off some of that stuff that I was talking about at the front, because we almost always have a lot larger audience for these from people that are watching it as replays. So this will be out there for a while. I miss you. Dustin's been here in Colorado for a long. He's been down in Texas now for a while, and so it's nice to see you and talk with you. And obviously we talk about business stuff, but we don't actually get to do personal stuff as much as we'd like at times. So thank you. Any questions from anybody else, either online or in the room, before we finish? Here's your chance to ask him something personal.
When are you coming back?
Yeah.
From the room, it was, when are you coming back? So.
That's a good question.
Yeah. He's been able to have a little bit of a vagabond life here for the last little bit, and as those that are here locally know, that he actually had been living and had been here in Colorado in a fifth wheel after selling his house for some time, and intentionally, and having that be an experience for him and his family. So I think he's leaving his options open, a little bit like the question there at the end. What would you do if you're in a new circumstance? So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dustin. Thanks for our audience. We'll be doing this again on, I believe, Leigh-Ann, the 16th. What's our next 2 weeks from today? Is it what?
Today's the
7th,
right?
so the 21st. 21st. So Wednesday the 21st at 1 o'clock again. We're going to be interviewing Mike Butts, who is the curator, the guy in charge of the Berthoud Urban Farm at Grace Place, which is a local urban farm here in northern Colorado. Mike has got an interesting background in history. He's actually an artist and is an amazing, has an amazing ability to make things out of just nothing that have beauty associated with them. He also is a a musician, and his son Elijah worked for us and with us for a time, and Mike's a good friend of mine, and I don't know for sure. I'm asking Leigh-Ann here, is he going to actually come here so he'll be with us live, or have we talked about that yet? But anyway, he'll either be online again and he's in the local area, or he'll be with us here in the room. That's so, Dustin, thank you, and say hi to everybody. And yesterday I didn't see it, but I guess there was a Facebook post of some concrete, right? And the boys out looking at it, so you must be doing something concrete related.
Well, I was actually not involved in that at all. Yeah, I just poured a slab in a small pole barn shed structure. But yeah, I wasn't there for it. So
okay.
Always have fun.
All right, cool.
Flat work is not an area that I have skills in.
Is it started to get warm there yet?
It's definitely warm. I mean, we're in the mid-80s.
It's still not 100 though. Well, hey, everybody, thank you so much. Thanks for being here. Come back and visit with us again in a couple of weeks. Also, I think between now and then, we're going to actually be starting a podcast channel, and you can subscribe to it on iTunes, where all of these webinars will be made as audio. We're probably not going to put them on as video, but on an iTunes channel that'll probably be the Seed, C-E-E-D channel, and you'll be able to go on, and we ask you if you would to like that and to subscribe to it and give us some comments, and again, look forward to it. And Dustin, you were worried about having quiet, and we didn't hear anything in the background. Looks like you're looking over. Maybe you've got family that are not too far off, but it worked out well once you got the personal hotspot working. So, all right, love you, and we'll talk to you later.
We'll see you.
All right, bye-bye.